The evening had begun quietly, as it usually did in their small, familiar house on Maple Street. Ethan lounged on the couch, his legs stretched out, phone in hand, scrolling aimlessly through videos and messages, trying to escape the dull hum of the house. The soft sounds of everyday life surrounded him, the distant barking of a dog, the faint ticking of a wall clock, the low buzz of the fridge. Everything felt normal, almost too normal, as if nothing could ever change. Then, without warning, the front door slammed shut with a force that made the entire house shake. Ethan jumped, his heart pounding. The sudden sound cut through the usual calm like a knife. For a moment the house felt empty, too empty. His father's coat hung near the door, swinging slightly from the force, as if marking a path that someone had just vanished from. And then came the silence. Heavy, strange, different from the usual quiet of night. It wasn't peaceful, it was tense, expectant, as if the house itself were holding its breath. Before Ethan could even process what had happened, a voice pierced the stillness. "Ethan!" His mother's voice, sharp and trembling with urgency, called from somewhere deeper in the house. The panic in her tone made his chest tighten. "Run to the bedroom, now!" she shouted, her words almost cracking under the weight of fear. Ethan froze for a moment, unsure of what he should do. That instinct took over. He didn't hesitate. Whatever was happening, it was serious. He leapt from the couch, his feet pounding the wooden floor as he ran down the hallway, adrenaline surging through him. His eyes caught quick flashes of familiar things, the family photos on the wall, the small potted plants near the window, the stacks of books in the corner. But he didn't notice any of it. All he could see was his mother, her figure tense and shadowed in the dim light, moving in a way he had never seen before. When he reached the bedroom, he found her standing in the center of the room, pacing back and forth, hands twisting the hem of her sweater nervously. Her eyes were wide, glistening with unshed tears, and her lips trembled as if she were holding back a flood of words. For a moment, Ethan couldn't speak. The panic and fear in her gaze were unlike anything he had ever seen. She looked at him as if he were the only person who could make sense of the chaos that had suddenly entered their lives. "What's happening?" Ethan asked, his voice urgent but careful. He wanted answers, but he could tell she wasn't ready to give them yet. She shook her head, a small, helpless motion. I didn't know what to do," she whispered. Her voice was soft now, almost fragile, yet it carried an intensity that made Ethan's stomach churn. There was something in her tone, something unspoken, that made him realize the situation was more serious than he could imagine. "It's complicated," she said finally, her words deliberate, hesitant. "I thought maybe I could handle it, but I can't." Ethan's heart raced as he tried to process her words. His father had left, yes, but there was more beneath the surface. Something unspoken, something that made the air in the room feel thick and heavy. Ethan stepped closer, unsure of what he would find or hear, but ready to be a part of it. He had always known that life was messy, that adults sometimes hid things from children, but he had never felt the weight of it so intensely before. His mother's hands shook as she reached for the edge of the bed, gripping it tightly. "When Dad left," she said slowly, her voice breaking slightly, "I thought it was just another argument. I didn't think it would feel like the world stopped. I didn't know it would feel like losing a part of myself." She swallowed hard, struggling to hold back tears. Ethan watched her, feeling a strange mix of fear, empathy, and something he couldn't quite name. Her vulnerability drew him in, made him want to comfort her, to protect her, even though he was only a teenager. The room seemed smaller, heavier, as if the walls themselves were closing in. Ethan noticed the subtle details, the way her shoulders trembled, the way her eyes darted toward the door, as if expecting someone to appear, the way her lips parted slightly, as though she had a secret she wasn't ready to share. Everything about her presence screamed urgency, desperation, and an emotional intensity that made Ethan's mind spin. For a moment, they simply stood there. Two figures in a room filled with unsaid words. The silence between them was almost unbearable, thick with tension and anticipation. Then she spoke again, more softly this time, almost to herself. "I didn't know who else to call. You're the only one I can trust right now." Ethan felt a surge of responsibility. His mother, who had always been the anchor in their lives, was showing a side he had never seen, fragile, human, and completely open. It made him feel grown-up, important, and scared all at once. He nodded slowly, though she couldn't see him clearly in the dim light. "I'm here," he said quietly. "Whatever it is, I'll stay with you." She gave a small, shaky smile, a mix of relief and lingering fear. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The words were simple, but they carried an emotional weight that made Ethan's chest tighten. For a brief moment, the room felt safe, though the storm outside, both literal and metaphorical, had not yet passed. Outside, the street was quiet again, the slam of the door long gone, but the tension lingered. Inside, Ethan and his mother were caught in a web of fear, longing, and uncertainty. It was the kind of moment that changed everything. Even if no one fully understood how yet, Ethan realized that the world had shifted in a single instant. The calm normality of their home was gone, replaced by uncertainty and emotional intensity. His father's absence, the sudden panic, and his mother's vulnerability created a new reality, one that demanded courage, understanding, and emotional connection. He didn't know what the next moments would bring. He only knew he couldn't leave her side. And as he looked into her eyes, a silent promise formed in his mind. He would be there, no matter what. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, still catching his breath from the panic that had erupted moments ago. His mother moved around the room, hands twisting and pulling at the hem of her sweater, pacing as if the motion could somehow organize her chaotic thoughts. The dim light of the bedside lamp cast shadows across her face, highlighting the tension in her jaw and the quiet tremble in her lips. There was something different in the air, now, a heavy weight of secrets and emotions neither of them had expected to confront tonight. "Ethan," she began, her voice soft but quivering, "I don't know how to say this, but I need you to understand." Her words hung in the air, fragile, uncertain. Ethan leaned forward, sensing the urgency, the hidden vulnerability that his mother rarely showed. There was a raw honesty in her tone, a trembling openness that made him feel both protective and anxious. "What is it, Mom?" he asked carefully. He didn't want to rush her, but the question burned in his chest. His eyes never left hers, noticing every slight movement, the way her fingers gripped the blanket, the quick flick of her eyes toward the window, the faint quiver of her shoulders. He could see her struggle to hold back emotions she had buried deep for so long. She paused, as if gathering her courage, then slowly sank onto the bed beside him. Not too close, but close enough that her presence filled the space between them. A hand hovered near his, a breath away from touching him, as though seeking connection, but unsure if it was right. The tension in the room shifted, becoming intimate yet safe, charged with the kind of emotion that was rare and hard to name. "When Dad left," she whispered, her gaze dropping to her hands, "I thought I could handle it. I thought I could just keep going as if nothing had changed. But the truth is, I felt completely alone." She looked up at him now, eyes shining with the weight of her confession. "And when I saw you running down the hallway, I realized I need you more than I thought. Not just as my son, but as someone who can understand me, who can be here with me in moments like this." Ethan felt his heart tighten. Her words were unexpected, layered with meaning that went beyond the simple reality of a parent's concern. He reached out, instinctively placing his hand over hers. The warmth of her skin beneath his fingers was grounding, calming. And yet, it stirred something deep in him, a mix of empathy, love, and a complicated awareness of the emotional intimacy growing between them. "Mom, I'm here. I don't care about anything else," he said, his voice firm yet gentle. "I'll stay with you. We'll figure this out together." His words seemed to surprise her, and for a moment she allowed herself a small, shaky smile. There was relief there, but also a hint of something more, a subtle recognition that they were both navigating emotions that had been unspoken for too long. She leaned back slightly, exhaling slowly, as if releasing some of the tension she had been holding. I feel like everything changed the moment he left. I thought I was strong, but I wasn't. I felt the walls closing in, and the silence. It became deafening. Her voice dropped to a whisper, barely audible, carrying the weight of loneliness and longing. "And then you came running, and I realized I'm not alone. Not completely. Not when you're here." Ethan stayed silent, letting her words sink in. He could feel the layers of emotion in the room, the fear, the heartbreak, the vulnerability, and the fragile connection forming between them. It was like standing on the edge of a new reality, one that neither of them had expected, but one they couldn't ignore. He could feel her tension slowly melting into a different kind of closeness, a shared understanding that transcended words. "Sometimes," she continued, "life puts us in situations we don't understand, moments we don't know how to navigate. And in those moments, the people we care about most become the only anchor we have. Tonight, Ethan, you were that anchor for me." Her voice was soft, intimate, full of honesty, and the words wrapped around him like a gentle embrace. Ethan's chest tightened. The raw emotion in her voice made him aware of the depth of her pain, the way she had held herself together for so long, and the subtle shift in their relationship that was unfolding right before his eyes. It wasn't just a mother seeking comfort from her child. It was a quiet acknowledgement of their shared vulnerability, a bond forged in a moment of crisis. They sat together, hand in hand, the silence stretching comfortably around them now. It was no longer tense or fearful. Instead, it carried a delicate weight, a sense of understanding and unspoken trust. Ethan realized that some moments in life, even brief ones, could change everything. Tonight was one of those moments. "Ethan," she said again, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need you to know. I didn't expect any of this. I didn't expect to feel so exposed, so aware of what I'm missing. I didn't expect to need someone as much as I need you right now." Her eyes met his, searching, vulnerable, and full of a quiet longing that went beyond simple words. Ethan nodded slowly, squeezing her hand gently. "I understand, Mom," he said, truthfully. "I'll be here, no matter what." His words carried more than comfort, they carried a promise. A silent acknowledgement that he was ready to face whatever came next with her. Together. For the first time since the panic began, she allowed herself to relax slightly. The tremor in her shoulders softened, and her breathing became steadier. The room felt warmer, smaller in a comforting way, as if the emotional storm outside had been replaced with something fragile but beautiful. They didn't need to speak anymore. The connection between them, built on trust, vulnerability, and unspoken emotion, was enough. Minutes passed, but neither moved. The world outside the bedroom faded away. The sounds of the house, the creak of the floorboards, The hum of the fridge, the distant night noises, blended into a background that seemed almost irrelevant. What mattered was the bond forming in that small space, the delicate interplay of fear, longing, and the quiet recognition of shared humanity. Ethan realized something important. Life didn't always make sense, and people didn't always act the way he expected. But moments like this, moments where raw honesty, emotional vulnerability, and trust came together, were rare, and they could change everything. His mother finally leaned back against the pillows, closing her eyes for a brief moment. "Thank you," she whispered softly, though her eyes never left his. "For being here, for understanding, for everything." Her voice trembled slightly, full of emotion, full of depth. Ethan felt a sense of calm wash over him, mixed with the lingering intensity of the night's events. The panic that had erupted earlier had transformed into a quiet, intimate connection, something that neither fear nor uncertainty could erase. And in that moment, both of them understood that life had shifted in subtle but powerful ways. They were no longer just mother and son in the ordinary sense. They were two people connected by shared fear, trust, and a moment of emotional honesty that would linger long after the night ended. Outside, the world continued as usual. But inside the bedroom, time had slowed, hearts had opened, and something fragile, delicate, and deeply human had begun to grow. It was the beginning of understanding, of emotional closeness, and of a bond neither had expected, but both would never forget. The room was quiet now, but it was a quiet filled with tension, emotion, and unspoken words. Ethan and his mother had shared a moment of vulnerability, a fragile connection that neither had anticipated. The air seemed charged, heavier than before, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the weight of their feelings. Ethan's hand still rested gently over his mother's, and neither of them moved for a long moment, letting the silence speak for them. Finally, she spoke again, her voice soft, deliberate, and full of a strange intensity. "Ethan, I need to tell you something important. Something I haven't said before." Her eyes, glistening with emotion, held his gaze. There was a hesitation there, a careful weighing of words, but also a deep need to be understood. Ethan leaned in slightly, attentive, sensing the gravity of the moment. He could feel her heartbeat in the space between them, quick and uneven, mirroring the rush of emotions in the room. I felt alone for so long," she began, almost whispering. "Even when everything seemed normal, even when we smiled, I carried this emptiness inside me. I thought I was handling it, that I could hide it. But when Dad left, everything changed. The silence, the absence, the uncertainty, it all became too much." She paused, drawing a shaky breath, as if the next words would expose something deeply personal. Ethan didn't speak. He only listened, letting her words sink in. Each syllable carried weight, each pause held meaning. There was no judgment in her tone, only honesty, and the raw vulnerability of someone opening their heart fully for the first time in a long time. "I didn't know who to turn to," she continued. "I was scared, and I didn't want to admit it. But then, you ran to me. You didn't hesitate. And in that moment I realized, I'm not as alone as I thought. Not when you're here." Her hand tightened slightly under his, a subtle plea for connection, for understanding, for reassurance. Ethan felt a rush of emotions he couldn't fully name. Relief, concern, empathy, they all collided in his chest. He squeezed her hand gently, letting her feel the strength behind his presence. "Mum," he said softly, "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Whatever happens, I'll be with you." His voice was calm, steady, carrying the promise of safety, comfort, and loyalty. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. A mixture of relief and lingering anxiety. Her eyes softened as she looked at him, and for the first time that night, a faint smile broke through the tension on her face. It wasn't a full smile. There was still worry and fear. But it was genuine, and it carried hope. "Thank you," she whispered. "I didn't know if anyone would understand. I didn't know if anyone could." The room felt smaller, cozier, charged with an intimacy that went beyond words. Ethan noticed every detail, the way her eyes shone with unshed tears, the slight tremble of her shoulders, the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air. It was a moment that felt suspended in time, delicate and fleeting, yet profound in its significance. "Ethan," she said again, her voice quieter now, almost a whisper meant only for him. "I feel things I didn't expect to feel. The longing, the need to be understood. It's stronger than I imagined. And it's confusing. I didn't know I could feel this way. Even with someone I trust completely." Her words hung in the air, intimate but safe, filled with the complexity of human emotion, longing, vulnerability, and the desire for connection. Ethan's heart pounded, but not from fear. There was a strange warmth in her honesty, a pull that made him aware of the depth of their emotional bond. He didn't respond immediately. Words felt inadequate. Instead, he simply stayed close, hand in hers, presence steady and unwavering. His silence spoke as loudly as any words could. "I understand. I'm here. I care." She exhaled slowly, letting herself relax slightly against the pillows. "Life doesn't prepare you for moments like this," she admitted, voice soft and trembling. "You think you can manage, you think you're strong, but then something happens, and suddenly you're aware of what you're missing, of what you've been longing for without even knowing it." Her eyes met his again, searching, vulnerable, filled with emotion that couldn't be contained. Ethan felt a surge of protectiveness, but also a deep connection, an understanding that this moment was important for both of them. "Mum," he said quietly, "you're not alone anymore. We'll face this together. We can figure things out. Whatever comes next, I'll be here with you." His words carried a weight that matched hers, a balance of reassurance and emotional honesty that bridged the gap between them. She smiled faintly, tears threatening to fall but held back by the sheer force of emotion. "It's strange, isn't it?" she murmured. "How life can bring people together in unexpected ways, in moments you never anticipate. How fear, heartbreak, and longing can create something fragile and beautiful at the same time." Ethan nodded, feeling the truth of her words. The room was quiet again, but the quiet was no longer tense. It was full, rich with unspoken understanding and the fragile beginnings of trust. He realized that life was messy, unpredictable, and often painful, but it was also capable of moments like this, where honesty and vulnerability could create connections that were stronger than fear or loneliness. "Mom," he said softly, "I don't fully understand everything that's happening, but I do know we're in it together. And that's enough for now." His voice was calm, steady, carrying a quiet confidence that seemed to settle some of the lingering tension in the room. She nodded slowly, a tear escaping down her cheek, quickly brushed away. "Yes," she whispered. "Together." Her hand tightened around his, a silent affirmation of trust, protection, and mutual support. They didn't need to speak any further. The bond between them had shifted, deepened by honesty, emotional intimacy, and the shared recognition of vulnerability. Outside, the night continued, silent and indifferent to the quiet storm of emotions within the bedroom. But inside, time seemed to slow, allowing them to breathe, to feel, and to connect in a way that neither had expected but both silently welcomed. It was a delicate balance of fear, longing, and the subtle beginnings of emotional understanding that could shape the night